The Cold War is often remembered in images: the Berlin Wall, the missile silos of the Dakotas, the bomber fleets on constant alert. But the most critical front of the conflict was one that no one ever saw. It was a silent war, fought in the crushing darkness, thousands of feet beneath the surface of the ocean. This was the domain of the ballistic missile submarine, the ultimate guarantor of peace through the promise of total destruction. To understand the story of K-129 and the audacious American plan to steal it, we must first understand the logic of nuclear deterrence. By the late 1960s, the balance of power between the United States and the Soviet Union rested on a concept known as the nuclear triad. Both superpowers relied on three distinct methods to deliver their nuclear arsenals: land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, strategic bombers, and ballistic missile submarines, SSBNs. Of these three, the submarine was the most important. Land-based silos were fixed targets. Satellites could see them, and enemies could target them. Bombers were vulnerable to air defenses and took hours to reach their targets. But a submarine was different. A submarine could disappear. It could hide in the vastness of the Pacific or Atlantic, undetectable and unreachable. This invisibility provided what strategists called second strike capability. It was the guarantee that even if the Soviet Union launched a surprise attack that destroyed every American city and silo, the submarines would survive. Rising from the depths, they would launch a retaliatory strike so devastating that no rational leader would ever dare to start a war in the first place. If the submarines were safe, deterrence held. If they became vulnerable, if one side found a way to track and destroy them, the entire strategic balance would collapse. The ocean was not just a hiding place. It was the foundation of global stability. Into this high-stakes game sailed K-129. She was a Project 629A submarine, known to NATO as the Gulf II class. Unlike the sleek, nuclear-powered vessels that would later dominate the seas, K-129 was a diesel-electric boat. She was a product of a transitional era in Soviet naval engineering. Powerful, deadly, but flawed. Her primary weapon was the R-21 missile, the first Soviet submarine-launched ballistic missile that could be fired from underwater. K-129 carried 3 of them in her large sail structure. Each missile was tipped with a 1-megaton thermonuclear warhead, enough destructive power to erase a major American city from the map. However, K-129 had a significant weakness. As a diesel-electric submarine, she relied on batteries for submerged propulsion. These batteries had limited endurance. Periodically, the submarine had to come near the surface to raise a snorkel mast, run her diesel engines, and recharge. This process, known as snorkeling, was the moment of greatest vulnerability. The diesel engines were noisy, creating a distinct acoustic signature that could be detected by enemy sonar. The snorkel mast created a wake that could be spotted by radar or aircraft. Compared to the American nuclear-powered Polaris submarines, which could stay deep and silent for months, K-129 was a loud and visible adversary. This reflected the technological gap of 1968. The Soviet Union was racing to catch up, fielding powerful weapons on platforms that struggled to hide them. In early 1968, K-129 departed her base on the Kamchatka Peninsula for a routine patrol in the Pacific. Her mission was to disappear into the vast ocean north of Hawaii, holding her missiles in readiness. But she would never return. While the Soviet Navy relied on secrecy, the United States Navy relied on science. By 1968, the Americans had deployed a secret weapon of their own, SOSUS, the Sound Surveillance System. This was a vast network of hydrophones, underwater microphones, laid along the seabed of the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. SOSUS was designed to listen for the specific acoustic fingerprints of Soviet submarines. Every propeller has a unique rhythm. Every engine has a unique vibration. The ocean, which seemed silent from the surface, was actually a cacophony of noise to the trained ear. On March 8, 1968, the SOSUS array in the Pacific recorded something unusual. It wasn't the rhythmic thrum of a propeller or the grind of machinery. It was a single, sharp, catastrophic sound. The signal originated from a point near the 181st meridian, far north of Hawaii. Analysts studied the recording. It was brief and violent. It did not sound like a torpedo explosion or a collision. It had the distinct, terrifying characteristics of an implosion. An implosion occurs when a submarine sinks below its crush depth, the point where the pressure of the ocean exceeds the strength of the steel hull. When the hull fails, the water rushes in at supersonic speed, crushing the vessel in milliseconds. The sound of that collapse travels for thousands of miles through the deep sound channel. That single acoustic event changed everything. The Soviet Navy knew K-129 was missing when she failed to check in, but they had no idea where she was. They launched a massive surface search, scouring hundreds of thousands of square miles of ocean, in vain. They were looking for an oil slick, debris, anything. But the Pacific is too big to search blindly. The United States, however, didn't need to search. Thanks to that one sound, triangulated by multiple hydrophone arrays, they knew almost exactly where K-129 had died. While the Soviet fleet frantically crisscrossed the ocean's surface, American intelligence quietly marked a spot on a chart. The submarine was lying in the abyss, 16,000 feet down, waiting to be found. For months, the ocean floor north of Hawaii remained a silent tomb. The Soviet fleet, having failed to locate their missing submarine, eventually gave up the search and declared K-129 lost with all hands. They assumed the wreck was gone forever, swallowed by the immense depths of the Pacific. But the Americans were just getting started. In August 1968, a peculiar ship slipped out of Pearl Harbor. The USS Halibut looked like a standard nuclear attack submarine, but she had been heavily modified for special operations. She was equipped with a fish, a towed camera sled connected to the submarine by miles of cable. Her mission was to confirm what the SOSUS hydrophones had heard. The search was a needle in a haystack operation, even with the coordinates. The Pacific floor at 16,000 feet is a world of total darkness and immense pressure. It is a landscape of silt and volcanic rock, unseen by human eyes. For weeks, the Halibut combed the area, dragging her camera sled just above the bottom. The crew watched grainy black and white monitors, looking for anything unnatural. Then, they found it. The first images were haunting. A shape emerged from the darkness, the unmistakable silhouette of a submarine sail. As the camera sled moved closer, the full extent of the tragedy became clear. K-129 was broken in two. The aft section, containing the engine room and living quarters, was severely crushed and scattered. But the forward section, about 138 feet long, was relatively intact. This was the prize. It contained the torpedo room, the control center, and, most importantly, the missile tubes. The photographs brought back by Halibut electrified the U.S. intelligence community. They were looking at a pristine Soviet ballistic missile submarine lying on the ocean floor. It was an intelligence goldmine. Inside that wreck lay the secrets of Soviet nuclear technology, their cryptographic codes, their sonar capabilities, and perhaps even their operational orders. This discovery presented the CIA with an unprecedented opportunity, but it also presented an impossible engineering challenge. No one had ever recovered a vessel from that depth. The Titanic, for comparison, rested about 12,500 feet. K-129 was nearly a mile deeper. The pressure at that depth is over 8,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a conventional submarine like a soda can. Deep-sea salvage technology in 1968 was in its infancy. Most operations barely went below 1,000 feet. The idea of lifting a 2,000-ton steel hulk from 3 miles down seemed like science fiction. It required technologies that simply didn't exist. However, the potential rewards were staggering. During the Cold War, knowledge was power. Understanding the design of Soviet nuclear warheads could save billions in defense spending. Breaking their naval codes could give the U.S. Navy a decisive advantage in tracking their fleet. Knowing the limitations of their sonar could allow American submarines to operate with impunity. The CIA weighed the risks. The operation would be incredibly expensive, estimated at over $800 million, roughly $4 billion today. It would require years of preparation, and it had to be done in total secrecy. If the Soviets found out, it would be an act of war. Stealing a sunken warship is technically piracy, regardless of the flag it flies. Moreover, it was a grave, desecrating the tomb of nearly 100 sailors. Despite the immense technical and political hurdles, the decision was made. The potential intelligence gain was deemed worth the cost. The CIA greenlit the operation under the codename Project Azorian. But how do you build a massive recovery ship without anyone noticing? How do you construct a giant claw capable of grabbing a submarine from the ocean floor without alerting Soviet spy satellites? The answer lay in the world of high-stakes industrial espionage and cover stories. The CIA needed a front. They needed someone wealthy, eccentric, and known for ambitious, slightly crazy projects. They needed someone who could plausibly claim to be building a giant ship for a completely different purpose. They found their man in Howard Hughes. Hughes was already a legend, an aviation pioneer, a movie producer, and a reclusive billionaire. He had a history of secret government contracts and a reputation for doing the impossible. The CIA approached him with a proposition: lend his name and his company to a cover story that would hide the true nature of Project Azorian. The cover story was brilliant. Hughes announced that his company, Summa Corporation, was venturing into deep-sea mining. The story was that the ocean floor was covered in manganese nodules, potato-sized rocks rich in valuable minerals like nickel, copper, and cobalt. Hughes claimed he was building a revolutionary ship to harvest these nodules from the seabed. It was a perfect deception. The mining industry was genuinely interested in deep-sea resources at the time. The sheer scale of the ship could be explained by the need to process thousands of tons of ore. The secrecy could be explained by Hughes's legendary paranoia and desire to protect his proprietary technology. Soviet intelligence bought it. They saw the construction of the massive Hughes Glomar Explorer at a shipyard in Pennsylvania and assumed it was just another capitalist venture. They even sent ships to monitor its sea trials, but they were looking for mining equipment, not a giant claw designed to steal their secrets. Behind the scenes, the best engineers in America were working around the clock to solve the physics of the lift. They had to design a pipe string that could support its own weight over 3 miles. They had to create a capture vehicle, nicknamed Clementine, that could gently grasp the fragile hull of the submarine without crushing it. And they had to figure out how to keep a 600-foot ship perfectly steady in the middle of the Pacific Ocean while a pendulum of steel hung beneath it. Project Azorian was a gamble of epic proportions. It was a technological moonshot undertaken in the shadows, with the fate of the Cold War hanging in the balance. As the Glomar Explorer prepared to set sail, the stage was set for the most audacious heist in history. The engineering challenge of Project Azorian was staggering. The CIA needed to lift a 2,000-ton section of a submarine from a depth of over 3 miles without anyone noticing. To put this in perspective, the deepest commercial salvage at the time was around 250 feet. The target was 16,500 feet down. At that depth, the pressure is 500 atmospheres, enough to turn a styrofoam cup into a thimble. The water is near freezing, pitch black, and utterly unforgiving. The primary obstacle was not just lifting the weight, but managing the immense strain on the lifting mechanism itself. The steel pipe string that would connect the ship to the capture vehicle had to be over 3 miles long. Its own weight in water would be tremendous, far exceeding the weight of the submarine section it was meant to lift. The pipe had to be strong enough to hold the load, yet flexible enough to withstand ocean currents and the heave of the ship on the surface. Then there was the problem of positioning. The recovery ship had to hold its station directly above the wreck with pinpoint accuracy. In the open ocean, wind, waves, and currents constantly push a ship off course. If the ship drifted too far, the long pipe string would snap like a twig. In 1968, GPS did not exist. The engineers had to invent entirely new systems of dynamic positioning, using acoustic transponders on the ocean floor and thrusters on the ship's hull to keep it locked in place automatically. The solution was the Hughes Glomar Explorer, a ship unlike anything ever built. It was massive, 618 feet long and displacing over 50,000 tons. But its true genius lay hidden inside. The center of the ship was hollow, dominated by a huge moon pool, a large opening in the bottom of the hull. This allowed the capture vehicle, a massive claw-like structure nicknamed Clementine, to be lowered secretly into the ocean without ever being seen from the outside. The pipe string was assembled section by section within a giant derrick amidships. Each 60-foot length of high-strength steel pipe was screwed into the one below it, slowly lowering Clementine toward the abyss. The process was painstakingly slow and dangerous. A single failed connection could send millions of dollars of equipment plummeting to the bottom. To hide all this activity, the CIA needed a cover story so audacious that no one would question it. They turned to the eccentric billionaire Howard Hughes. Hughes was already famous for his reclusive nature and ambitious projects, from record-breaking aircraft to Las Vegas casinos. His involvement provided the perfect explanation for the secrecy and the massive expenditure. The public story was that Hughes' company, Summa Corporation, was venturing into deep-sea mining. The ocean floor is covered in manganese nodules, potato-sized rocks rich in valuable minerals like nickel, copper, and cobalt. The claim was that the Glomar Explorer was a revolutionary prototype designed to suck these nodules from the seabed like a giant vacuum cleaner. It was a brilliant deception. The mining industry was genuinely interested in deep-sea resources at the time. The sheer size and complexity of the ship could be explained by the need to process thousands of tons of ore at sea. The secrecy could be attributed to Hughes' legendary paranoia and desire to protect his proprietary technology from competitors. Soviet intelligence bought it. They watched the construction of the massive ship at a shipyard in Pennsylvania and assumed it was just another capitalist venture. They even sent their own spy ships to monitor its sea trials, but they were looking for mining equipment, not a giant claw designed to steal their secrets. The Glomar Explorer was built in plain sight, its true purpose hidden behind a wall of corporate PR and industrial intrigue. While the world marveled at Hughes's latest folly, the engineers of Project Azorian were working in the shadows. They tested Clementine in a secret underwater facility in the Bahamas. They refined the dynamic positioning system until the massive ship could hold station within a few feet in rough seas. They trained crews for a mission that technically didn't exist. By the summer of 1974, everything was ready. The Glomar Explorer set sail for the North Pacific, officially to mine manganese nodules, but secretly carrying the hopes of the American intelligence community. The target coordinates were programmed into the navigation computer. Below decks, the moon pool doors opened, and Clementine began its long, silent descent into the dark. The operation was fraught with risk. The Soviet Navy still patrolled the area. If they discovered the true nature of the mission, it could trigger an international incident, perhaps even war. The wreck of K-129 was, after all, a sovereign vessel of the Soviet Union and a gravesite for nearly 100 sailors. Disturbing it was a violation of maritime law and a profound act of disrespect. But the stakes were too high to turn back. The potential intelligence gain, nuclear warhead designs, cryptographic codes, sonar data, could shift the strategic balance of the Cold War. As the Claw reached the bottom, the crew held their breath. The easy part was over. Now they had to grab a broken submarine from the mud and bring it home. By August 1974, the Hughes Glomar Explorer had arrived at the target coordinates in the North Pacific. Below the massive ship, the claw-like capture vehicle, Clementine, began its agonizingly slow descent. The engineers and CIA officers on board watched the telemetry feeds with a mixture of excitement and dread. They were attempting something that had never been done before, lifting a 2,000-ton object from a depth where steel behaves like glass and water pressure can crush a submarine in an instant. The descent took days. Each 60-foot section of pipe had to be carefully threaded and screwed into the string, lowering Clementine foot by foot into the abyss. The ship's dynamic positioning system fought the ocean currents, making thousands of micro-adjustments every second to keep the pipe perfectly vertical. If the ship drifted too far, the pipe would snap under its own weight, sending the entire assembly crashing to the ocean floor. Finally, Clementine reached the wreck of K-129. The cameras on the capture vehicle relayed grainy black and white images of the broken submarine resting in the silt. The forward section, the prize they had come for, lay slightly apart from the shattered stern. The Claw maneuvered into position, guided by the operators on the surface. Slowly, the massive steel fingers closed around the hull of the Soviet submarine. The lift began. The strain on the pipe string was immense. The ship shuddered as the winches took the load. Inch by inch, the submarine rose from its grave. The engineers monitored the stress gauges, praying that the ancient steel of K-129 wouldn't disintegrate. For 7 days, the operation continued in tense silence. The submarine climbed higher and higher through the water column, passing depths that no human had ever visited. Then, disaster struck. At approximately 8,000 feet, halfway to the surface, a sharp crack echoed through the ship. The sensors showed a sudden drop in load. On the video monitors, the unthinkable happened. A structural failure in one of the Claw's grapple arms caused it to lose its grip. The heavy aft section of the submarine, containing the missile compartment and the control room, slipped free. The crew watched in horror as 2/3 of their prize tumbled back into the darkness. It fell slowly at first, then gathered speed, crashing back onto the ocean floor with a force that likely shattered what remained of it. The missile compartment, the most valuable part of the wreck, was gone. Only the bow section, about 38 feet long, remained in the Claw. It contained the torpedo room and some sonar equipment, but the heart of the intelligence value, the ballistic missiles and the cryptographic codes, had slipped through their fingers. The disappointment was crushing. After years of planning and hundreds of millions of dollars, they had come so close to a complete success, only to have it snatched away at the last moment. Despite the failure, the operation continued. The remaining section of the submarine was brought up into the moon pool of the Glomar Explorer. The doors closed beneath it, sealing the secret from the outside world. The ship turned for home, carrying a fraction of what it had set out to recover. But even a fraction was significant. The recovered section contained 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes. These were tactical weapons, designed to destroy enemy submarines or surface ships. Analyzing their design would give U.S. scientists invaluable insight into Soviet nuclear technology. The sonar dome and fire control systems would reveal the capabilities and limitations of Soviet sensors. And there were other things in the wreckage, things that were not made of metal. Inside the twisted hull, the recovery team found the bodies of 6 Soviet sailors. They had died instantly when the submarine imploded 6 years earlier. Their remains were treated with the utmost respect. The CIA, despite its reputation for cold calculation, recognized the human tragedy of the situation. These men were enemies in life, but in death, they were fellow mariners who had perished in the line of duty. The decision was made to give them a burial at sea. It was a solemn and surreal ceremony. On the deck of a secret spy ship, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, American intelligence officers and crew gathered to honor the fallen Soviets. A chaplain read prayers in both English and Russian. The Soviet naval flag, obtained for just such an occasion, was draped over the containers holding the remains. The national anthems of both countries were played. Then, the bodies were committed to the deep, sliding into the same ocean that had claimed them once before. This act of respect stands out in the history of the Cold War. At a time when the two superpowers were locked in a bitter ideological struggle, moments of shared humanity were rare. The burial of the K-129 sailors was a reminder that beneath the uniforms and the politics, there were people on both sides. The intelligence value of what was recovered remains a subject of debate. Was it worth the $800 million price tag? Critics argue that the loss of the missiles and codebooks made the operation a failure. Supporters point out that even partial knowledge of Soviet nuclear designs was priceless. The recovery of the torpedoes confirmed that the Soviets had mastered certain technologies earlier than expected. The metallurgical analysis of the hull provided data on Soviet submarine construction. But perhaps the greatest value of Project Azorian was not what it found, but what it proved. It demonstrated that the United States had the capability to reach anywhere on the planet, even the bottom of the ocean. It showed that American engineering could solve problems that seemed impossible. And it served as a powerful psychological weapon. When the Soviets eventually learned of the operation, they were stunned. They had assumed their lost submarines were safe in the deep. Now they knew that nothing was beyond the reach of American intelligence. The story of Project Azorian is one of ambition, failure, and partial success. It is a testament to the lengths nations will go to in the name of security, and it leaves us with a lingering question. What else is out there, hidden in the dark, waiting to be found? The recovery of the forward section of K-129 was a bittersweet triumph. While the primary intelligence prize, the nuclear missiles and cryptographic gear, had been lost, the operation had yielded unexpected and poignant results. Inside the twisted steel of the submarine's bow, the salvage team found the remains of 6 Soviet sailors. These men had died instantly when K-129 imploded 6 years earlier. They were casualties of the Cold War, young men serving their country far from home. In the midst of a secret intelligence operation designed to steal their technology, the CIA made a remarkable decision: to honor them. In September 1974, a solemn ceremony took place on the deck of the Hughes Glomar Explorer. It was a scene of profound irony and humanity. American intelligence officers and engineers stood side by side with the recovery crew. A chaplain read prayers in both Russian and English. The Soviet naval flag, the very symbol of the enemy they had spent their careers fighting, was draped over the containers holding the remains. As the national anthems of the United States and the Soviet Union played over the loudspeakers, the bodies were committed to the deep, sliding into the same ocean that had claimed them once before. This burial at sea was recorded on film. It was a secret act of respect, hidden from the world for decades. At a time when the superpowers were locked in a bitter ideological struggle, moments of shared humanity were rare. The Americans recognized that these sailors were not just targets or statistics. They were fellow mariners who had perished in the line of duty. But secrets are hard to keep, especially when they involve a ship as large and mysterious as the Glomar Explorer. In early 1975, investigative journalist Seymour Hersh caught wind of the story. He began piecing together the details of Project Azorian, realizing that the mining ship was actually a spy vessel. When Hersh contacted the CIA for comment, panic ensued. The operation was still classified. Exposing it could trigger a diplomatic crisis with the Soviet Union, perhaps even jeopardize future recovery missions. The CIA director, William Colby, personally intervened, asking major news organizations to suppress the story in the interest of national security. For a time, they agreed. However, the story was too big to stay hidden forever. In March 1975, columnist Jack Anderson broke the news on national television. The Los Angeles Times followed suit the next day. The cover story of Howard Hughes and his manganese nodules collapsed overnight. The world learned that the CIA had attempted to steal a Soviet submarine from the bottom of the ocean. The revelation sparked a frenzy of Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, requests from journalists and the public. They demanded to know the details. How much did it cost? What was recovered? Was it legal? The CIA found itself in a legal and public relations quagmire. They couldn't confirm the operation without officially admitting to espionage and violating international law. They couldn't deny it because the evidence was overwhelming. In response, the CIA crafted a legal statement that would become legendary. They refused to confirm or deny the existence of any records related to the operation. The exact phrasing was, "We can neither confirm nor deny the existence of the materials requested, but, hypothetically, if such data were to exist, the subject matter would be classified and could not be disclosed." This non-answer became known as the Glomar Response. It was a brilliant piece of bureaucratic maneuvering. By refusing to acknowledge even the existence of the program, the CIA avoided confirming specific facts while maintaining the veil of secrecy. The courts upheld this response, ruling that the government could withhold information if confirming its existence would reveal intelligence sources and methods. The Glomar Response has since become a standard tool for government agencies facing inquiries about classified programs. It allows them to deflect questions without lying. But in 1975, it was a novel and frustrating tactic for journalists seeking the truth. The exposure of Project Azorian had immediate geopolitical consequences. The Soviet Union was furious. They accused the United States of grave robbing and piracy. They increased their naval patrols in the Pacific, determined to protect their other lost submarines. The incident strained the fragile détente between the superpowers. Yet, despite the public outrage, the Soviets were privately impressed. They marveled at the audacity and technical prowess of the Americans. They realized that their own deep-sea capabilities were lagging far behind. The operation forced them to accelerate their own research into underwater technology and submarine rescue. For the United States, Project Azorian was a mixed legacy. It was an engineering triumph that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in the deep ocean. It demonstrated the lengths to which the intelligence community would go to gain an advantage. But it also raised ethical questions about the cost and legality of such operations. Was the intelligence gained worth the risk of provoking a nuclear rival? Was it right to disturb a war grave for strategic gain? The Hughes Glomar Explorer itself had a strange afterlife. After the operation, it was mothballed for decades. Eventually, it was converted into a deep-sea drilling vessel, ironically fulfilling the cover story it was built to support. It spent the rest of its life exploring for oil and gas, its secret moon pool sealed forever. Today, the story of K-129 and Project Azorian remains one of the most fascinating chapters of the Cold War. It is a tale of ambition, secrecy, and the silent, deadly game played beneath the waves. The Glomar Response endures as a reminder of the power of words to hide the truth, while the memory of the 6 Soviet sailors buried at sea stands as a testament to the enduring humanity that can exist even between enemies. The immediate fallout from the exposure of Project Azorian was intense. The Soviet Union was publicly furious, accusing the United States of piracy and desecration of a war grave. Privately, however, the Kremlin was stunned. They had assumed their lost submarines were safe in the deep abyss, beyond the reach of any adversary. The realization that the Americans could locate and lift a vessel from 3 miles down was a strategic shock. It meant that no Soviet secret was truly safe, even at the bottom of the ocean. This revelation had a profound impact on the Cold War arms race. The Soviets accelerated their own deep-sea research and modernization programs. They began developing quieter submarines and more advanced encryption methods, fearing that their existing fleet was vulnerable. The operation, though only partially successful in retrieving the missiles, had succeeded in shifting the psychological balance of power. It demonstrated that American technological reach was virtually limitless. But the legacy of Project Azorian extends far beyond the Cold War. The engineering breakthroughs achieved during the operation revolutionized the offshore industry. The dynamic positioning system, designed to keep the Glomar Explorer steady above the wreck, became the standard for deep-water oil drilling rigs. The heavy lift technology used to raise the submarine section paved the way for modern subsea construction and salvage. Today, when an oil platform holds its position in a hurricane or a robot explores the Titanic, it is using technology that traces its lineage back to the CIA's audacious gamble. The story also leaves us with a lingering mystery. What exactly happened to K-129? The official Soviet explanation at the time was vague, often blaming a collision with an American submarine. The U.S. Navy has consistently denied this, pointing to the acoustic evidence of an internal explosion. The recovery of the forward section provided some clues, but not a definitive answer. Was it a battery explosion? A missile fuel leak? A rogue command? Or perhaps a mutiny, as some conspiracy theories suggest? The truth lies somewhere in the classified archives of both nations. The CIA has released some documents over the years, confirming the general outline of the operation, but withholding key technical details. The Russian government has also declassified some files, acknowledging the loss of the submarine, but maintaining silence on the cause. One of the most intriguing unanswered questions concerns the cryptographic material. Did the CIA recover codebooks or machines from the wreck? If they did, it would have been an intelligence coup of historic proportions, allowing the U.S. to read Soviet naval communications for years. The official line is that no codes were found, but in the world of espionage, the official line is rarely the whole story. The operation also raises ethical questions about the nature of intelligence gathering. Is it acceptable to disturb a gravesite for strategic advantage? Does the pursuit of national security justify the enormous cost and risk of such a mission? Project Azorian pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in the silent war between the superpowers. Ultimately, Project Azorian stands as a testament to human ingenuity and audacity. It was a mission that should have been impossible. It required the invention of new technologies, the creation of a massive cover story, and the execution of a delicate operation in the most hostile environment on Earth. It was a moonshot of the deep ocean, conducted in the shadows. As we look back at this extraordinary chapter of history, we are reminded that the Cold War was not just a conflict of ideologies, but a contest of capabilities. It drove nations to attempt the impossible, to reach further and deeper than ever before. And in the process, it changed our understanding of the world beneath the waves. The Hughes Glomar Explorer has long since been scrapped, its secrets dismantled along with its hull. The wreck of K-129 remains on the ocean floor, a silent memorial to the 98 men who died aboard her. But the story of their intersection, the spy ship and the submarine, continues to captivate us. It is a story of secrets, science, and the relentless pursuit of the unknown in the abyss. When we think of the Cold War, we often picture the Berlin Wall or the Cuban Missile Crisis, events that played out in the light of day. But the true history of that era is written in the shadows, in the silent depths where submarines patrolled and spies operated. Project Azorian reminds us that the most significant battles were often the ones we never saw. It challenges us to consider the cost of secrecy. Billions of dollars were spent, lives were risked, and history was altered, all for a prize that was only partially recovered. Yet the knowledge gained, both about the enemy and about our own capabilities, shaped the world we live in today. The technology that allows us to explore the ocean floor, to drill for energy, to understand our planet, was forged in the crucible of that secret mission. The 6 Soviet sailors buried at sea by their American adversaries serve as a poignant symbol of our shared humanity. Even in the midst of a global conflict, there was a recognition that some things, honor, duty, sacrifice, transcend politics. They remind us that beneath the uniforms and the flags, we are all mariners on the same fragile planet. Thank you for spending part of your day with us to explore this incredible story. If this journey into the deep past resonated with you, we'd be honored to have you with us again.